Welcome to Gallup, everyone. I've known Edie Frazier for some time. She is quite the force. So Edie, thank you for bringing us all together today to have this important conversation. You know, I heard a statistic up here recently that the world needs, I think, 430 million STEM jobs. What we wanted to present today is I would argue that that issue, that problem, is probably far worse. We did a survey 10 years ago where we asked the world what the single biggest issue is facing the world. Do you know what they told us? And again, this changes leadership strategies because this is now the biggest issue facing the world. What the whole world wants today is a good job. But there's a problem with how it's measured. Let me give you a few examples. Right now, if you think back to what are the single biggest issues facing the world today? Let's take poverty, for example. How many people live in poverty around the planet? 50%. If you look at just adults, it's about 2.5 billion. That's according to the UN. How about literacy? Roughly 1 billion people around the planet are illiterate. How about hunger? According to the UN, 1 billion people are hungry. How about access to clean drinking water? Again, another billion people. So if jobs is the single biggest issue facing the planet today, then what are the statistics behind it? Right now, according to the ILO, 5.9% of people are unemployed. That's it. And if you map that to the adult population who's in the workforce, that's only 200 million people. So how is it that that statistic, which is so much lower and dwarfed by the other major issues facing the planet, how is it that that's the single biggest issue facing the planet? Edie, it's funny that you showed that prop, because I brought my own. I think all of you are probably familiar with this magazine, The Economist. Probably read it on a weekly basis. And we all flip to the back and we look at unemployment rates. Have you seen this? Haver Analytics actually provides them the data. When you look through and look at unemployment by country, let's just do a pop quiz. What's unemployment in France? It's 10% right now. France, of course, a member of the OECD, one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So what if we went to one of the poorer countries in the world, like Pakistan? What's unemployment right now in Pakistan? Again, you'd think unemployment was far worse in Pakistan than in France. But would it surprise you if I told you that only 5.9% of people in Pakistan are unemployed? I'm just going to give you two other ones. Right now we know India, 4.9% of people are unemployed in India. Think about that. 60% of all Indians still practice open defecation, yet only 6% of them are unemployed. How about in the United States right now we know 5% of people are unemployed. So statistically, they're on par. That's what the job market assessment of both of those economies. If these numbers don't make sense to you, they shouldn't. Because if you look at the statistical relationship between unemployment and GDP per capita, one would think that they would be negatively correlated, that the richest countries in the world would have the lowest unemployment rates, or that the poorest countries in the world would have the highest unemployment rates. Fact is there is no statistical correlation between them. In fact, if you look at this list, the economy of the top 43 economies in the world that has the lowest unemployment rate, it's Thailand. Does that suggest that the best jobs market on the planet is Thailand? No. So now you're asking probably, John, why is that happening? Why is it that there are so many economies on the planet that report such low unemployment rates? It's this simple. It's how it's measured. A gross oversimplification on how unemployment works, many of you are probably very familiar with this, if not actually done these surveys yourself, but the ILO makes a recommendation to every central statistics office around the planet. And they say, here is a labor force survey that you should administer to 30, 60,000 people on a monthly, if not quarterly basis, and then they're asked a series of questions. After that, when they are asked those questions, they're then categorized as either self-employed, people who are part-time who don't want full-time work, people who are part-time who do want full-time work, people who have what we would argue that's a good job, and then the last category, they're unemployed. The rest are outside of the workforce. They're either students or they're homemakers or they're retired. Here's the issue. If you look at the global figures for that, we can see that about 40% of people have a good job. We know that about 5 to 8% of them are unemployed. Roughly 10 to 12% are part-time who want full-time, and another 10 to 12% are part-time who don't want full-time. The last category is what's called self-employment. That makes up 30% of the global workforce. Now think about that. Here in the United States, when we hear self-employment, we think of two concepts. One is entrepreneurship, and the other one is a small business owner. And we think that's what American freedom stands for, to be able to own your own business, to be able to start your own business. But for the rest of the world, self-employment does not mean that. Self-employment means you're begging. It means you're a subsistence farmer. Of the 30% of people that report, according to those metrics, around the planet that are self-employed, half of them live on less than $2 a day. So that metric of unemployment at 5.9%, if you aggregate the people who are part-time that want full-time, and you aggregate the people who are begging that are reported that they're self-employed, you could argue that unemployment is not 5.9%. Real global unemployment is more like 34%. That's a figure that makes a lot more sense when we're talking about the single biggest issue facing the planet today. Now, I want to say one other thing because the problem actually gets worse. Because what we know from all of the work that we've done with global workplaces is the importance of a great job. And the metrics that we look at from the ILO and Gallup are measuring a good job. Now, what does this mean? I had a conversation with a woman at the World Bank, and I said to her, we're actually trying to quantify a great job. And she said, we're doing the same thing. So, out of curiosity, I said back to her, how are you going to measure that? And she said, we're going to do two things. We're going to look at their pay, and we're going to look at their benefits. That's how we're going to quantify a great job. Do you see the problem with that? Statistically, we have proved that people take pay cuts in order to do work that they love. But how do you quantify work that someone loves? Well, we figured it out. And we ask a series of questions. It's what we call engagement. Many of you have heard this. Maybe many of you run this at your offices today. But the questions sound something like this. One of the questions that we ask people is just, do you know what's expected of you at work? Do you know that over half of people around the planet, this is unbelievable to me, half of people around the planet say that they can't strongly agree to that statement? That means when they show up at their workplace, they don't know what they're supposed to do. Think about that. The next one is, do you have the resources and materials that you need to do your job effectively? Only 40% of people around the planet strongly agree to that item. And the other one, another barometer for love for your job, is whether or not you have the ability to do what you do best. 1/3 of the planet can strongly agree to that. If you map all of our items and you really look at the number of what we call engagement, the percentage of people that have a good job that are also engaged, which we would consider a great job, is only 13%. So let me give you this math. If there are 7 billion people on the planet and there are 5 billion adults, what we know is that 3.2 billion of them want a great job. The rest of them, as I mentioned, are homemakers or students or that they're retired. And we know that 1.3 billion of them have a good job. But when we look at that percent that is actually saying, yes, I strongly agree to an item like, yes, I have the ability to do what I do best in this job, that number goes all the way down to 13%. And if you map that to the billions of people that actually want a great job, only 183 million people on the planet have a great job. That means 3 billion who want a great job don't have a great job. That's the real metric on global joblessness. The reports that you have at your desk today, they're the green reports that say the 2016 Global Great Jobs Report. We actually did exactly what The Economist did. We created this list, and this list is in the back, and rather than saying unemployment, which is arguably the lowest common denominator that leaders could be held accountable for in terms of job creation, to the highest common denominator, which is great jobs. And you can see by country what percent of people in each of those countries have great jobs. Edie, thank you again for having us here today, and we hope that this is a conversation starter in terms of holding leaders accountable for what's arguably the biggest issue facing the world today. Thank you.